Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1997. As you drink your citrus-flavored Surge drink by the Coca-Cola Company, while your dad's watching Mike Tyson rip off a piece of Evander Holyfield's ear, also while your brother is in his room blasting R. Kelly's I Believe I Can Fly out of his SL S120 Panasonic portable CD player, you begin to boot up the classic game Castlevania Symphony of the Night. As you're exploring the absolutely gorgeous and detailed castle, you realize, hey, wait a minute. Oh, wait, shoot, I'm low on health. And then it hits you. Oh, God, for frick's sake. You get a game over screen. Okay, time travel to the year 2002, alright? Your little brother is now a man and has changed the channel to George Lopez while your roommate, who eats Cheetos loudly, starts playing Phantom Planets California. You decide, hey, I'm in a Resident Evil type of mood. So you boot up the beautifully crafted masterpiece of a game, Resident Evil Remake.
Resident Evil. I don't care. I like it.
As you explore the mansion and take in the breathtaking details in the moonlight, you start to realize that, wait a minute, I'm out of herbs, and then, oh, again, it happened again. If there is one overarching factor that ties all video games together, it's a game over. The concept of the game over has its roots in the classic arcade cabinets. In order for the developers of these cabinets to get as much money from the player as fundamentally possible, developers created a game over, where if the player failed too many times while playing the game, they would experience a game over and restart to the very beginning of the game. The concept was created mainly to limit game time of the player, and this concept is pretty much as old as time, since most sports
Ronaldinho success!
would limit match time as well, i.e. soccer starts off with 2 periods of 45-minute matches with a 15-minute halftime. But what differentiates video games from a physical sport like soccer is that in soccer's case, once the match is finished, it's finished. There's no way to replay that specific match. If you sucked, you sucked. But with video games, the player can start from where they originally started, and in doing so, can find it easier to master their certain game mechanics and level design. That's why back in the arcade days, it wasn't uncommon to see players spending their hard-earned quarters to hog the centipede or mappy cabinets in order to fully study and beat the game. Game overs give a great incentive to the player to keep trying until you finally beat that one level that has given you crap for the past couple months. That's why when you finally master a game's controls and beat that one level, it's one of the most rewarding feelings ever. So we see that game overs are actually a pretty clever concept to entice the player to keep playing, and to also make as much money as humanly possible. But as time progressed and video games got more and more creative, developers had to find new and clever ways to keep the player playing their game. Because players started to realize, hey, game overs kind of suck. Well, in the sense that a game over is the last thing you want to see when playing a game, because it indicates that you did so bad that you need to try again and do better. So as arcades phased out and home video game consoles got more popular, devs started to get more artistic and creative with this concept. Let's start with traditional game over screens. I'm talking about the arcade style game overs. I'm talking about the very basic game over screen that you see in a regular game. Now, these are as simple as you can get, with most giving you a basic game over text with some very shameful music. For example, Pac-Man's death sound is super iconic. Such a simple yet effective sound that exemplifies the feeling of defeat. Like, geez, okay fine, I'll do better next time. Mappy is one of my favorites because of how this little sprite animates. With his eyes all wobbly, like it makes you feel really bad, like geez, I'm the one who failed to protect this guy. There's a sort of beauty in their simplicity, a really nice charm to these classic game over screens. And while don't fix what's not broken, developers clearly wanted to expand on the potential of what a game over could be. Let's take a look at arguably the most iconic game over of all time. So iconic that your grandmother knows what this is the minute they hear it. Again, that little motif is so simple yet so effective in giving the players some grief for basically killing Mario. So in order to avoid repetition, each new iteration of Mario's adventure had a brand new motif to accompany the game over. You had Mario 3's classic jingle. You had Mario World's descending piano motif that ends with what's in my opinion the most beautiful game over passage ever created. See, music plays a key role in giving a game over its personality. The Mario game over stayed relatively simple, but throughout the years, each composer brought their own take on a new motif for Mario's death. I personally love New Super Mario Bros. Game over music, so jazzy and chill.
Oh no!
But once again, Mario has stayed relatively the same. And as much as I adore Odyssey, it was pretty disappointing with the dead basic death sound with no personality whatsoever. So let's jump outside of the Mario games. During the late 90s and early 2000s, racing games were most certainly in their golden age. The style, the presentation of these games are certainly one of a kind. The beautiful fast-paced music, the striking sound design, these games are some of the most simple yet memorable gaming experiences of all time. But in Sega Rally specifically, when you suck so bad, the game decides to grace you with arguably one of the greatest game over screens of all time. These game over screens are brief but memorable because of how wacky and stylized they are. Daytona USA 2001 spelling it out for you is always a treat to watch as well.
You place first.
Metroid certainly had some very memorable ones to me. The simple power suit powering down sound effect with the sound of its destruction.
That's a woman?
Metroid Dread is a great evolution of this classic game over screen as well. It's so striking.
You can push yourself to the limit, be strong and jump with me. You can fly above the rainbow with me, close your eyes and just believe.
Fighting games always have brief but timeless game over screens. Street Fighter in general has a great combination of music and effective wording that gets burned into your brain the first time you experience it.
1-0. Game over.
We await your return, warrior.
Capcom vs SNK 2s always sticks with me all these years later.
Don't succeed. You can always try again. It's such a shame, but I wait for your next challenge. I know that you'll be back.
That is seriously one of the most memorable things I've ever seen in a video game. Like, it's just so cool. I really can't articulate how much I love it. I think it's amazing. Personally, I would put continue screens in their own separate category from game over screens, but I really want to show you Marvel vs. Capcom 2's continue screen specifically because of how wonderful it is.
Don't you want a rematch? Don't give up. Challenge again.
Music really makes video games. I cannot express that enough. I really noticed how some of the most memorable and iconic game over screens of all time rely on music to boost the feeling of defeat or determination. Music is the driving force behind why so many of these screens really stick with you even years later. Marvel 2's calming jazz really cements that feeling of hope and not wanting to give up any great game over screen should have. Definitely my personal favorite on this list. Sometimes less is more when it comes to game overs. So with that being said, let's talk about the more innovative game overs. The first game that comes to mind when I think of a game over is the hit 80s arcade game Dragon's Lair. For those who don't know, Dragon's Lair was an innovative game where the entire game is fully animated in traditional hand-drawn animation. The player would have to move in specific directions in order to progress forward. Since this game has gorgeous animation that was unheard of for a video game at the time, the creator Don Bluth decided to get more creative with his death screens, rather than what most players are used to. Don Bluth said the most fun part of making Dragon's Lair was coming up with so many creative and funny ways that Dirk the Daring can die.
I'm not a gamer, and so when it came time to doing the game, a young man named Rick Dyer brought it to us and said, I want you to do a game about a little knight that goes into a castle and saves a princess. Well, the whole idea, the concept sounded good, but I didn't know how to do a game. So the entire game, which is about 20 minutes worth of animation, is a threat, a resolve, a threat, a resolve. The fun of the game was showing how many funny ways a person can die and still resurrect.
The amount of animation specifically created for Dirk's death are absolutely amazing and also hilarious. Most of them make you feel genuinely bad, like damn, these are just shockingly brutal, but others are so wild and so creative that you really take in just how much work and creativity went into making this game. The main game over animation is hilarious. Dirk's just pissed off with his arms crossed that you couldn't save him from the castle's creatures. Him getting electrocuted by the chair, getting crushed by the giant marble, his foot getting trapped in the door, and my personal favorite. Another game that comes to mind immediately is the Arkham series of video games. Every time you fail, a different villain will monologue their final words to you before finishing you off. Not only does each villain have their own unique personalities, but some are genuinely disturbing. Like Clayface saying he's gonna become Batman.
Next, I will become you, Batman!
Or Bane just breaking your back in the most brutal way possible.
The bat is broken!
The best one, however, comes from Scarecrow basically screwing with you to the point where the game fakes a crash, then gives you a fake game over screen.
Did anyone catch the game last night?
I've waited a long time for this, Bats. Let's start the party with a bang. What the hell was that?
This confused the crap out of me when I first played, but that was the point. So good on you guys for making one of the most memorable game overs of all time. It's great to see developers really push the idea of a game over, and using it in new and innovative ways to really challenge the player to think about what they just saw. Now, creativity lends to some really memorable and innovative game overs, but the most memorable ones, in my opinion, are when the creativity of developers lends into some of the most twisted and dark parts of the human mind. I'm talking about this section are the kings of delivering an absolutely memorable experience for the last thing you see before restarting the game. These are the game overs that really stick with you in the best way possible. Some are so eerie, so creepy that you can't help but think back to them from time to time. Immediately I think of The Last of Us and their collection of disturbingly realistic deaths. The bloater ripping apart Joel's face. Every time an infected latches onto you. That ascending shock sound effect that plays. What makes these even more disturbing are when you play as Ellie, who, keep in mind, is only 14 years old in the first game. It's genuinely upsetting seeing these beloved characters die in such brutal ways. And these death screens have certainly stuck with me in the best way possible. The most disturbing death screen to me by far is in the original version of The Last of Us. If you fail to protect Ellie, Henry, and Sam on the streets, Resident Evil, objectively being the greatest horror game ever made, naturally has some super iconic death screens. I love how straightforward it is. If you fail to protect Jill or Chris or whoever you were playing as, here you go, just a bold "You are dead" in bloody letters. Chrono Trigger's final battle is against a creature called Lavos, and the whole point of the game is to save the world by going back in time to prevent this global catastrophe. But if you fail to defeat Lavos, this happens. And of course, the last games you think of to have disturbing game over screens are of course Nintendo's games, right? Well, prepare to be proven wrong because Nintendo is arguably responsible for the most disturbing game overs ever made. Luigi's Mansion used to scare me as a kid. Seeing Luigi fall over while the ominous text saying goodnight, it still gives me chills. And of course, while never officially released, the beta version of Luigi's Mansion's Game Over still creeps me out to this day. See, in the original beta of the game, there was a time mechanic, and if you took too long to save Mario, well, this would happen. The Donkey Kong Country games are gaining a reputation for their unnecessarily creepy game over screens as well. In Zelda 2 on the NES, when the player dies, you get a blood-red screen saying the return of Ganon, along with some creepy laughter just to stick the point home. Now, since we're on the topic of Zelda, Majora's Mask's Game Over segment is one of the best in video game history. This game is creepy, so artistically twisted with themes of death, mortality, and impending doom. So of course this game has a game over so twisted and ominous. If you take too long and let the moon crash towards Earth, you are greeted with this. Not only does this animation show Link getting consumed by fire, not only is the depiction of Clocktown getting destroyed unsettling, but you hear the happy mask salesman's laugh and then see this quote.
Jesus.
Well, let's lighten the mood a bit, shall we? And I want to introduce to you, which is in my opinion, the greatest game over of all time. Yeah, no, there's no contest, no arguments, no nothing, okay? In 1995, the world was graced with a little-known gem by the name of Total Distortion. What's Total Distortion, you may ask? Well, I'm gonna sum up the entire game by showing this one clip.
Don't come any closer, or I will destroy you. Guitar Warrior!
hot. Guess what? You're not.
You are dead, dead, dead.
You brought your whole adventure to a screeching halt.
You are dead, dead, dead.
Your heart has stopped and your brain is cold. You were so dead, and now your body is starting to mold. You were so dead.
There are simply so many game over screens that are so creative, innovative, beautifully simple, beautifully creepy, that it would be impossible to list every single one here. So with this video, I hope to have shown you the power that these game over screens can have on the overall game experience. While game over started with the intention to encourage a player to try again by spending more of their money, the art form has certainly evolved and become more and more creative over time. The game over is one of the most integral parts to any video game because it's always the last thing the player sees. The game over is room for developers to really explore how to encourage the player to try again, because the best game over screens leave you different from when they found you. The best game overs stick with you even years later after you play them, and the best game overs are an artistic expression of everything the game you are playing is about. So let's keep celebrating these beautiful pieces of the gaming puzzle together, everyone, and I'll see you soon.